I'd like to talk about two guests at two separate dinners. But before we do that, I'd like to summarize this story a little bit. When I first read it a few days ago, I was this whole idea of somebody trying to get to the front of the line, get to the top place of the table to look good or be in an elevated status. It reminded me when I was at a Catholic high school, and we have these clubs, these groups, right? And they would come around, and at the end of the year, it was a big deal to have your photograph in the clubs you belonged to. And it was the funniest thing because the last day of on the day of the photographs for this annual, all of a sudden these kids showed up I'd never seen before to get their picture taken. They went to the next club and the next club, get all their pictures and all these things they'd never done. But they wanted to have that esteem. And so Jesus, of course, he's sort of the invited guest. He's the one that's the magnet in this dinner that he's coming to. And so what he does about this is he tells them a story that's a parable. But the question I have for you, when I read this, I go, how is this a parable? A parable is what's called an extended metaphor, or you could also say it's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. It's not an allegory where every single thing represents something else. It's just a general idea of Jesus kind of turning the table to help you understand the things of heaven, because he's the only one that's been to heaven that can come down and tell us what it's like. So he has to say, heaven's kind of like this. So how is this story like heaven? This idea or this heavenly meaning? And what helps a little bit is to say, Jesus says to do this, to put yourself at the bottom of the table. He's using the circumstances in which these people find themselves. And I think Jesus would rather be out in the wilderness with his buddies. But he does this because he goes to anybody who wants to talk to him, he will talk to them. He's open to anyone in his ministry. He wants everybody to hear this gospel, this good news. So how is this a parable? Who is the person that puts themselves at the back of the table where nobody else wants to sit? Jesus Christ. This is not about dinner, society things. This is about what God has done for us, that God took the lowest seat on our behalf. Let me read something to you. This is out of Philippians chapter 2. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, he was God, did not regard equality with God something to be grasped at, but he emptied himself. In other words, put away all of his glory and power visible to everybody, to all creation, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness, and being found in human likeness, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death on the cross. Now catch this last part. Therefore God also highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name. In other words, he was taken from the lowest table by God, the Father, the host, and put to the top of the table because of what he's done, by his acts of humility, by his carrying the sins of the world, by his willingness to associate with all of us, to be the servant of all. It's a fascinating understanding of how Jesus is. Now look with me with regard to this story. Wait, hold off just a second. I wanted to tell you one other thing. Jesus is so amazing that not only does he say, I want to take the lowest seat at the table, he says at times, I will not even be allowed to be at the table. Do you remember what happens on Holy Thursday night? What happens on Holy Thursday? What do we do that's kind of weird for Catholics? Washing of the feet. That's why I'm wearing sandals today. After Mass, you get a chance to show some humility and wash my feet. I'll be here till 5. Jesus takes the form not just of a lower end person, a B-lister. He takes the form of a slave. And he washes all the disciples' feet, and they're horrified by this. But he's trying to teach them a lesson that he says, true leadership, true service to God, true humility comes truly with esteeming others better than yourself. Even the Son of God does that. Now look with me, with that in mind, to Luke chapter 12, verse 37. Jesus is talking about the wedding banquet, and by that, it's a metaphor again for the heavenly feast, being in heaven with God. Look what he says here. Verse 37. Blessed are those slaves whom the master, meaning Christ, finds alert when he comes at the end of time. Truly I tell you, he will fasten his belt and have them sit down to eat, and he will come and serve them. Did you catch that? What is Jesus doing in the kingdom of heaven? This exalted one has been raised above all other names. He's serving us still. Humility is in heaven also. It's not just on earth. Doesn't mean we're going to be the big shots in heaven. It means the true leadership, the true strength, the true power is always going to be coming and serving, even in heaven. Worshiping God, serving one another. I don't know what that means, but I think it's just marvelous. It's fantastic that God has got that planned ahead for us. So don't get too excited about the idea of saying, man, when I'm in heaven, I'm never going to have to do this stuff no more. What it really means is you're going to do it with joy because it's part of your external experience of God, as he serves us and we serve him. Okay, let's talk about the first dinner guest. Taking a seat at the lowest table. I have a friend. No, really. I have a friend. And he has this weird living situation. He gets to live, for whatever reason, in a Benedictine monastery. He lives in a Benedictine monastery. Is he a Benedictine? No. He is a priest, but that doesn't make him a Benedictine. So he's there, and when you go and eat at a table with monks, it's a different arrangement. It's actually a rite of sorts. There's a way to do it. I one time, if you got to follow, you got to know the rules of the table. And about 15 years ago, I visited a monastery on the coast, and over kind of west of San Rafael, and I made the foolish mistake of sitting down before the abbot, and I heard this from all the monks. So I quickly stood up. Fortunately, the abbot was a patient guy, and he understood this guy doesn't know anything. But this friend of mine, he lives in this Benedictine monastery, and one day he said he's sitting up. They placed him at the table right next to the abbot. He's kind of on either the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the abbot, and it made him very, very uncomfortable. So one day, he just said, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. He took his table, he took his nameplate, took his whatever it is they had for him as plate, and he moved it further down among the brothers, the monks. And as he did this, getting ready for dinner, this old monk, older than Methuselah. You know how old Methuselah is if you don't look it up. He comes in and he says, "What's your stuff here for? Why'd you put your plate here?" And my friend said, "Well, I thought maybe I should be down further away from the bishop." He says, "You are not to pick your spot. Put this back." He said, "Okay, yes, sir." You go to the place where God sets you, and you serve there, and pray that it's the lower part of the table. The lower part of the table is the greatest place of honor. So that's the first dinner table. Let's go on, first dinner. Let's talk about another situation. Jesus continues with this story. When you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Jesus talks about people inviting their family over, their family, their relatives, or a rich neighbor who can have them over to their house. You can have really sumptuous food. So this idea of getting something from it. And Jesus says you're losing track of this whole thing again, because what you really need to understand is that the greatest reward, the greatest honor is to invite the poorest, the ones who can't pay you back, the ones who have nothing to offer you. And if we take this and we stretch it out and apply it not only to dinner, a dinner table, but to life in general, what does it show us? Jesus is the poorest of the poor. So if you really want to be close to God, you find the people who have nothing. You find the people who have to rely on God because they can't rely on themselves to get what they need. Matthew 25. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory, and the nations will be gathered, and he'll separate him as sheep from the goats. Remember that? And look what he says down at verse 34. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." Verse 35, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me in." Who do you bring in? It's the people who have a need, the people who have nothing. Then look at verse 37. "Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you stranger and welcomed you?' And Jesus said, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did it for one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it for me.'" What's the application? Whenever you see somebody in need, you're seeing Jesus Christ. Whenever there's somebody who's struggling, you don't just try and get out of the way of that person because they're going to take too much of your time. You say, this is a God moment. God has placed that person in front of me. Now, I will tell you this. Don't invite every stranger into your house. Okay? Just don't. I tried it once. Didn't work. Be thoughtful. Be prepared. Talking about Benedictines. In the rule of Benedict, they said whenever a stranger comes to the monastery, you prostrate yourself before them because Jesus Christ is in that person. That's how we have to look upon the stranger and the people of this life. Let me tell you about a second dinner. About a week ago, I got a call from some people. In fact, I don't always do this because my focus is to work at the base as much as possible, and of course all the people that are retired who are committed to the base program, the mission we're on, to support the military. But I got a call from this person, from a guy, and I'm not going to give you his name because you probably don't know him. His name is Ed. But don't tell anybody. He said, "You need to come see Ed because he's dying. We almost lost him last night. He's in the hospital." I've known Ed for about 10 years off and on. He showed up at the hospital at David Grant up in ICU, and we really hit it off. Good guy. His son told me, well, they brought the hospice priest in to see him, and he said, "I want the priest Travis. I want him to come and take care of me. I want him to do this." So I go over there at the end of a day last week. I think it was on Thursday. I drove over to Vacaville, and I went and saw him in his little house with his family, and he was in really bad shape. And it was hard, but there was a lot of love there. And what he really wanted was me to give him communion. He wanted to receive the body of Christ. And that's why he hung on. And so I went and saw him. I brought him communion, and was with the family. We joked around a little bit. And then he was kind of shaking a little bit. And his wife said, "Are you okay?" And he just stopped and he says, "I love God. I love God." Before he left, I said, "Ed, I want to come back and see you on Sunday. Will you wait for me?" He says, "Yeah, I will be here." He told me that twice. He said, "I will be here for you." And so right before Mass today, I got this text that says, well, Ed didn't make it. He had a prior dinner engagement where the food is full and rich and is served by Christ himself. This world is ephemeral, it's hard, it's difficult, it's messy, Sometimes the people that you're trying to show love to don't appreciate it. All that matters is finding Christ in your neighbor, doing good for people who need it, and being as low as you possibly can, because there you're going to find Jesus Christ sitting right next to you.